Here to break down the NFL draft, talk about his New York Jets, and so much more is Jake Asman of the Jake Asman Show, ESPN New York, also on the air with Mad Dog Sports Radio. He's a busy guy, year in and year out, a lot going on. But Jake, as we welcome you into the show, I got a question for you, man, because this time of year, some people will say it's a desert in the sports world, but I disagree. You got the Kentucky Derby, you got the Indy 500 upcoming, NBA postseason, NHL postseason, NFL draft. If I had to guarantee you just one of those events to watch year in and year out, you can lump the Masters in there if you want to. Which one event are you choosing and why?
Man, that's a tough question because I'm a huge football fan, of course, so I do love the draft every year, but I'm also a diehard Knicks fan, and the Knicks are in the second round in consecutive years for the first time in 25 years, so I'm not used to, the Knicks actually being in the mix 2 straight seasons. So I think I'd go NBA playoffs. I'll be at the Garden tonight for Game 1 of the Eastern Conference semifinals against the Pacers. So as a huge Knicks fan who's waited basically my entire life for this team to be relevant, I'm going to go with the NBA playoffs.
And it's a very exciting time, and a lot of people, Chris Canty, we played that clip earlier, saying that it would be a colossal disappointment if the Knicks don't advance past the series against Indiana. A lot to look forward to there. Let's talk hockey real quick, too, because I know the Islanders and the Rangers both in the mix in the postseason, but where do you stand on that particular choice between those two franchises? Are you a hockey guy?
I am a hockey guy. Unfortunately, I'm an Islander fan, though,
Gotcha.
so I don't get to truly enjoy this Rangers run that's going on right now. And they're certainly in the mix, to actually win their first Stanley Cup since Mark Messier and that 94 Rangers team. But it's kind of reminiscent of 94 in New York right now. The Knicks are in the second round. The Rangers are in the second round. If you remember in 94, both teams went all the way to the finals, and O.J. Simpson was in the news then, too. And here we are 30 years later. He's in the news again, and the Knicks and Rangers are championship contenders. So it's kind of full circle 30 years later in a way, which is crazy.
Must be a sign. Lastly, on that topic of the New York sports scene, I got to ask you this question because fandom runs really deep, and I know you're a Jets guy, I know you're a Knicks guy, and you just mentioned you're an Islanders fan as well. How much does it take, or will it ever take, will you ever end up rooting for the other New York team, or maybe the team down in Brooklyn in the NBA? Will you ever root for them if your team is out and they're on a big stage?
I couldn't do it personally. I know there's some who do. I just think if you're a fan, you have your team, and that's it. But that's also, to your point, what makes this Knicks run so unique. I've seen some people say, why are Knicks fans celebrating? Why are they going so crazy after winning a first-round series? And I just don't think people realize that the magnitude of the Knicks fan base in New York. If you think about it, New York has 2 baseball teams. The fan base is split. They got 3 hockey teams. The fan base is split. 2 football teams. So the fan base is split. Yes, the Nets are a thing, but we're talking maybe 5-10% of the tri-state area being Brooklyn Nets fans. So you're talking about the Knicks fan base that really reaches 90% of the entire area. It's like in Boston, everyone is a Celtics, Patriots, Red Sox, Bruins fan. Philly, they root for their team. Dallas, they root for their teams. Because New York is so big and you have 2 or 3 of every team, the Knicks are really the only team that can kind of unify the entire city. And since they've been bad for so long and they're finally relevant, that's why people are going crazy. So that's why you're seeing the passion for this Knicks fan base right now. But for me personally, I couldn't root for any other New York team that isn't the teams I root for.
Hey, I really appreciate that. I'm kind of a diehard as well. One team only in every single sport. Jake Asman of ESPN New York. Jake Asman Show on YouTube. Mad Dog Sports Radio is our guest here. Monday edition of Overtime. Takeaways from the NFL draft from a Jets perspective, my friend. I know it wasn't an exciting or sexy first-round pick. A lot of people would have loved to have seen another pass catcher there. Brock Bowers, maybe. You guys get the tackle from Penn State in round 1. Big takeaways from start to finish from a Jets perspective in the NFL draft.
The Jets, in my opinion, just operated like a smart franchise. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I've watched every rep of Olu Fashanu at Penn State and be like, yep, he's going to be a star tackle. But people you talk to, people who do it for a living, say he was thought to be maybe the best, just pure pass protector coming out. Maybe he could get a little better as a run blocker. That might be the one knock on him. But as far as pass protection goes, he's someone that right away could be a plug-and-play tackle for you. And I think what makes the Jets situation unique is he doesn't need to play right away. So he gets a chance to learn behind a future Hall of Fame player and Tyron Smith and a really good Iron Man type player and Morgan Moses at right tackle. He'll be the Jets swing tackle from day one. But you look at Tyron Smith's injury history, the last time he played a full season, Ryan Fitzpatrick was the Jet quarterback. So it's been a long time. So Tyron Smith last year was second-team All-Pro. He played 13 games. Every Jet fan would sign for that right now. But the reality is he's missed so much time that bringing in a guy like Olu Fashanu it helps your future because he's your long-term answer at left tackle, but it also raises your floor because I think when you look at the Jets and you talk about things that could go wrong, the thing that really could derail their season, besides Aaron Rodgers getting hurt, is all the O-line injuries from last year, and that also could lead to Aaron Rodgers getting hurt again. So just providing some real insurance there with Fashanu, to me, made a ton of sense. Premium position, which means he's on a rookie deal for the next 5 years. So when you got to pay a year from now, Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, Jermaine Johnson, Elijah Vera-Tucker, all these guys that are up for new deals, well, if you're not paying your left tackle a lot of money, that helps you keep those guys. So I think it was a smart pick for the immediate and the future as well. And then I really loved what they did day 2 of the draft. They traded up with some of the extra capital they gained in their trade down to move back just one spot with the Vikings, who wanted to get a quarterback. And they turned that into Malachi Corley, who they had on their board as a top 50 player. And he's someone that I think right away will come in and contribute in the slot in this offense. You know, he's nicknamed the Yak King for a reason. A lot of Jet fans maybe wanted Brock Bowers because of his prowess after the catch. Well, Malachi Corley essentially is Brock Bowers light. So I think Rodgers was pumped with that selection, and I think he's going to play a real role on this team. So I love what they did with their first 2 picks. And then day 3, you know, you're just taking dart throws. You're trying to find some talent. They took a couple running backs. They took a guy in Quantez Stiggers who's got a lot of talent. He's a very interesting backstory. You know, he was in the CFL and was Rookie of the Year there, and now he's, you know, going to get a chance to play in an elite, you know, secondary room led by Sauce Gardner. So it was interesting what they did. And then, you know, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, you know, they took a dart throw on a day 3 quarterback in Jordan Travis from Florida State. So, you know, maybe one day he's the heir apparent to Rodgers, but if he ends up just being a backup that costs you very little money, that's a pretty good asset management for a 5th-round guy. So overall, it wasn't maybe the sexiest draft as you brought up, but I think they accomplished a lot, and it was a productive draft for the Jets.
Jake, what was your favorite pick from the Jets' perspective? Because, of course, you go offensive lineman round 1. That could be your favorite pick, but is it Corley that kind of moves the needle the most for you as a fan and as an analyst, or is it somebody else?
Corley, to me, would be my favorite pick because the more I watch his film, the more I see, like, wow, like I can tell why they really like this guy. I guess maybe his route running needs to be a little polished, but there's just ways just to get the guy the ball and let him go. And that was such an issue for the Jets last year. Obviously, the quarterback play stunk, but outside of Garrett Wilson, there was no one in that receiver room you trusted with the ball in their hands. Allen Lazard was a major disappointment. He was a healthy scratch for 3 of their games by the end of the season. You look at what they've done this offseason, they added Mike Williams, who can play outside and inside. He complements Garrett Wilson really well. And I think Corley's a guy who will step in right away. He already is talking about living in Aaron Rodgers' guest house and developing chemistry with him. So I think every Jet fan's really excited to see what he can do. Plus, if your nickname is the Yak King or the Yak God, you're going to excite a fan base. So that's my personal favorite pick they made.
And a comp for me for Corley that I watched a little bit on film, and a guy that I loved when he was with the Packers, was with Rodgers. James Jones was that dude that wasn't fast, wasn't big, wasn't a great route runner, but when he had the ball in his hands, he would move at roughly like a 5.5 40 pace just through the defense, weaving and bobbing through. James Jones could be a good comp moving forward for Malachi Corley in New York. Jake Asman, our guest here. The AFC as it sits right now, there's still a whale of an offseason remaining, including a lot of free agents out there, but Chiefs and Ravens probably the top 2 teams. Who else do you put in that conversation, and how far back are the Jets as we sit here today?
If you just look at the talent the Jets have and you assume health, which you can, I think they're as talented as really any team. But you put the Chiefs in their own category, I think they've earned that, you know, based on the 3 Super Bowls in 5 years and all that. But, you know, a year ago at this time, I don't remember anyone talking about the Ravens as the 1 seed in the East. A year ago, you look at Miami, all the talk with them was, well, you know, is Tua going to stay healthy? And ironically, both Lamar and Tua were like 2 of the only quarterbacks that actually played every game. So, you know, I say that to say the NFL is such a year-to-year league. 5 of the 8 teams that were in the divisional round this year weren't in the playoffs a year ago. So, you know, if the Jets get health, I think they're right there with any team. I still think you got to respect Cincinnati if Burrow's healthy. I still think when you look around at, you know, the upper echelon teams, as long as Josh Allen is the Bills quarterback, even without Stephon Diggs, they're gonna be in the mix. But I really do think when you look at the top of the AFC, find me a team that has as much talent, at least on paper, than the Jets do. The key is going to be Aaron Rodgers being healthy and still proving, you know, he's a top 10 quarterback in the league. But you tell me he plays, let's say, 15 of 17 games, and Tyrod Taylor's there playing the other 2, there's no reason why the Jets can't compete in the AFC East for sure.
Interesting stuff. The New York Jets, the Cincinnati Bengals, a pair of teams that didn't make the playoffs last year that are definitely likely to do so this year. Last question before we let you go, Jake. Always appreciate the time and the insight. Here's your 7 playoff teams from last year in the AFC: Baltimore, Buffalo, Kansas City, Houston, Cleveland, Miami, and Pittsburgh. Take the 2 teams out that you think the Bengals and the Jets are taking the place of. Who falls out of the playoffs in 2024?
Man, it would be easy for me to say Pittsburgh, but man, it's like Mike Tomlin every year finds a way to get them in and keep them relevant. So it's tough for me to say that. I mean, I'm really not as high. Maybe I'll be called a hater because I am a Jets fan, but I'm not as high on the Dolphins as maybe some are. You know, I think they were fraudulent at times last year. I think we saw, down the stretch who they really were. I mean, Tua's never won a game in his career when the temperature is below 45 degrees. They had a 1-5 record against teams with a winning record a season ago. So I'm just not sold on the Dolphins like maybe some are. I know Tua was healthy last year, but could we see him be healthy again for another full year? I don't know if that's fair to say, but every time I talk about the Jets, people are like, oh, Aaron's going to get hurt. And it's like, well, he never really had an injury history until a fluke accident last year on the fourth play of the season. So I just don't think Miami is nearly as good as some people think. I think they got some major O-line questions. They lost Robert Hunt in free agency to the Panthers. Christian Wilkins signed elsewhere with the Raiders. So, they were up against the cap. They couldn't keep everyone. And, they're about to probably have to pay Tua a lot of money. And I think Tua's a good quarterback. I don't think he's a championship quarterback. So I have some questions about Miami, but I know to any Dolphin fan, I'm just going to be accused of being a hater, so it is what it is.
Hey, I'm on board with the Dolphins falling out of the postseason. I think the Bills take a step back. I don't know if they fall all the way out, but always appreciate the insight. We'll have time to debate that all over the next 4 months or so. Jake, appreciate the time as always. We'll do it again soon, my friend.
Bert, anytime. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Always a blast to talk with Jake Asman. Always check out that show, by the way, the Jake Asman Show on YouTube, even if you're not a Jets fan, which I am not. Compelling content, engaging fans, all sorts of great questions, and everything you want as a sports fan. The Jake Asman Show on YouTube. Also a contributor at Mad Dog Sports Radio and on the ESPN flagship out there in New York. That is ESPN New York.